The biggest problem people have is they think they're not supposed to have any. Problems are the fuel for growth, right? And so it's like, if you don't have any problems, you're either a liar or you might call them challenges. It feels better. I understand that. But, anybody who doesn't have problems is either totally asleep at the wheel or they don't have much of any kind of a life. No responsibility, nothing they're building. So I think the first thing is this misnomer that if I have a problem, there's something wrong with me or my life. And then I think the second one is this delusion we've sold people on that getting what you want is going to make you happy. You could call success getting what you want. I don't define it that way, but that's how most people do. But then there's fulfillment. And fulfillment is living what you're made for. It's like, I think the biggest challenge people have, and the reason they're not able to respond to challenges, they're just thinking about themselves, and it's not that hard to meet your own needs. And it's nobody's fault. I mean, these little things in our pocket, these little mini computers we used to call phones, they're constantly conditioning you to instantly get what you want. And that's not how human relationship works. And it's sure as hell not how you build a business, right? It's not a straight line. If you go to nature, you will not see a straight line unless a human built it. Because everything grows a little up and down like a stalk, like anything else. But if it really grows, it keeps growing, but it's a winding process. And so I think the problem is that people don't have something that they're wanting to serve more than themselves. That's where my energy comes from. I don't have to work in a day of my life. Why the hell do I do all this crazy stuff? I got 105 companies now, and I got all these different industries, because it's so much more interesting to be in the game of life and keep growing and expanding and being challenged. That's what makes you feel alive. And are there problems? With 105 companies, I can promise you. But if I thought my life was supposed to be problem-free, I would be really stressed out. And if I was just doing it for me, I would have stopped a long time ago. It's like, I know you've asked me a lot of times about confidence. Is it a lack of confidence? No, it's a lack of mission. What happens is when you have something you want to serve, if it's your child and everything's on the line, you will come up with answers you'll never come up with for yourself. Right? So it's like having that sense of mission. And then I think the next problem is that people think they have to know how. I call it the tyranny of how. Like, you get all excited, I'm going to do this. And then your brain goes, I've never done it before. Oh my God, what did I say? I don't know how to do this. And they tend to focus on how to do it. And when you start with how, you're screwed. Like, Martin Luther King had no idea how when he did his I Have a Dream speech. In fact, his wife was the one that pushed him because he was uncertain, right? But the bottom line is he gets up there and he gives his vision of how it can be done. He talked about what needs to happen and why. If you can figure out what you want and why you want it, and you get strong enough reasons that'll drive you late at night, it'll get you up early in the morning, and the reasons are different. Some people do it for nitty-gritty reasons, Jim Rohn used to say, because some guy told him he borrowed money from this finance company, I forget the name of HFC Finance, whatever the hell it was. And, he hadn't been back since he borrowed the money. So they're calling him in those days, they could harass you in ways they can't today, right? His first real chunk of money he told me he made because it's like, he set this goal. It was his nitty-gritty reason. His reason to get rich was so he could go down and pay this thing off. And he said he went to the bank and got it all in cash and in small bills, and he bolted into this little HFC, finance place. And the guy who borrowed the money was the fourth best back. And he said, I walked up there, I opened up this brief, and I dumped all the money all over his desk in small bills. And I said, count it, it's all there, I will never be back. He said he was startled because I hadn't been there since I borrowed the money, right? But he did it for nitty-gritty. Some people do it for their kid. Some people will do it, we'll almost all do it for something more than ourselves. Some people do it because they like winning. Right? It's like, I like winning. I like being the best at what I do. So I'm not going to settle for less than that. Why would I? Right? So you got to find your reasons. But if you know what you want and you get a big enough why, now you'll figure out how to do it. But if you start with how, the small brain, the fear brain, goes, oh shit, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't know what to do 90% of the time either. I know what and why, and then I try something. It doesn't work, I try something else. No, just something else. Now I speed it up by learning from the best. So that's why, Money Master the Game is a perfect example. My companies, at the time were $100 million companies. I had one $500 million company. Now we're doing $7 billion. I took what I learned from these guys. I applied it not only to my investing, I applied it to my own businesses. Why do I reinvent the wheel when I just learned from the best on earth? I mean, somebody who's that good can tell you that little 2 millimeter thing that changes everything. So my life is really about learn from the best, but I don't start with the how. I start with the what and the why. And I think that's the mistake most people make. And then how do you get confident? You do stuff. I mean, like, I'll give you an example. Speaking. You know, it's supposedly outside of falling like the second biggest fear people have, public speaking. And, you know, you've trained yourself so you don't feel that challenge. But I don't feel that challenge. And I've done it a million times, but I didn't feel it early on. And the reason was I tried to explain to people, I'm not getting up thinking about how I'm doing. If I did, I'd probably be a horrible critic of myself because I can be brutal in those ways. I'm focused on how do I serve them? What do they need? What do they want? How can I serve? And when you're focused on others and how to serve them, there's no lack of confidence in you because if it's not working, you just change your approach because it's all about serving. People that are scared to speak are thinking constantly, how am I doing? Am I good enough? Am I strong enough? You'll never get confidence. Confidence comes from doing something confidence is tying your shoes, right? Confidence on Michael Jordan making 1,000 shots before you take a break. Every single day, 6 days a week. So you look at Jordan or you look at, LeBron or you look at anybody who's the best in the world at what they do and you go, aren't they lucky? But if you actually study them, you'll see they're doing things, they're practicing in private things that make them certain in public and they get rewarded for what they do in public. And you got to do the same. The biggest mistake, people think they're supposed to walk out and be good at it. And if they're not, because, they don't want any part of it. I don't want to not look good, not be good, because we live in this social media world where they compare themselves to people that are bullshitting. I got a friend that owns a gym, and we laugh about this all the time. He says, Tony, at least 2 or 3 times. First time he told me this, I couldn't believe it. But I saw it happen one time when I went to go pick him up. We were going to have lunch, and he goes, look at this. And these people would come out, a woman or a man, they both do it, and lay out all this stuff, take a million pictures of themselves, and then leave. They didn't do any workout whatsoever. That's the bullshit social media when filters on pictures. And so people compare themselves to not other humans, they compare to people others' bullshit story. And that's why so many people get depressed when I'm sure you've seen the studies show the more time people spend on social media, usually the greater levels of frustration and anger and certainly depression for a lot of people have. Because you're comparing a world that doesn't matter, plus you're being reinforced by these algorithms in ways that go beyond your conscious awareness. Most people, Jim Rohn used to say, my teacher used to say, most people major in minor things. They know more about some actress's personal life than they know about their own physical body or their vitality or their energy or their emotion or their business or their career. And so what matters? A few subjects, your body, because your energy matters. That energy is low. Everything I just said is worthless to you. Because you're just going to go, he's talking too fast and there's a lot going on and hopefully the future will be better. Because when you're low energy, you don't use your full intelligence or ability. And most of us have not moved so much because of the environment of COVID, where everybody was pretty much locked down. And unless you live like I did in Florida, the point of the matter is most people, that energy has been lower. So you need energy. You need emotion. If you don't know how to master your emotion start wars. Emotion creates peace. Emotion gets you laid. Emotion gets you children. Emotion is what can make that business work or fail. And most people don't know how to direct their own emotions. What's another lesson? You got to look at your own financial world. If you don't master it, it's going to create enormous stress. Your relationships are everything, as we've already said. Your business or your career, or hopefully it's your mission. And then there's the spiritual side of life. So you can take a half dozen areas and go, let me find who's genius in this area and let me go learn from them. Let me go read, let me listen to podcasts. Let me be conscious about feeding my brain things that are going to give me not only inspiration, but insight and skill and tools. And everyone I know who is not only successful, but is able to contribute back to society, it has a hunger to constantly improve at least one area of those 6 areas of their life. And the most happy are the ones that hit in multiple areas. And that's why, like one of the reasons I wrote Life Force, richest man in the graveyard is not your goal. It's like, there's an old phrase that says, a person who's healthy has 1,000,000 dreams. A person who's not healthy has 1. you know? So I wanted to give people the cutting edge in that area because it's such a critical area.
Well, there's lots of differences, but I'd say the first one is someone who is financially rich is an owner. They're not a consumer. They're a consumer also. But when somebody is poor, they're a consumer. That all they do is they take I always tell people we're all financial traders. A lot of people say, I'm not a financial trader. Yes, you are. You're trading time for money.
Yeah.
That's the worst trade you can ever make in your life. Somebody who's wealthy has made money their slave. They're no longer the slave to money. And the way they do that is they figured out how to become an owner. And the way you do that in the most simplistic way, I even taught it in my first book, was you have to decide there's a percentage of money that you're going to keep forever. You're not going to give it to Kate Spade or Ferrari or anybody else. You can do that too. But there's a percentage of that income that never will be touched, that you will grow and compound and will provide income the rest of your life so you don't have to work. Now, when I was growing up, everybody's goal was get rich enough so you never have to work. Now, like all my friends are 15, 18 years my senior. People like Steve Wynn, who built most of Las Vegas. He's like 74. Warren Buffett's 85. Peter Guber, one of my dearest friends in the world, owns the Golden State Warriors, the LA Dodgers. We're partners in the LAFC football team in LA. Brilliant guy, 74 years old. And they're all working harder now than they ever were, and they don't have to work. So the goal is make enough money so you don't have to work, and then you'll do what you love, and you'll pour your time and energy into it. But you have to make that decision. It's the first most important decision is I'm going to become an owner of American business. You don't want to have an Apple phone and not own Apple. And you don't want to just own Apple because any company can go up and down. Right? You want to own the index. You want to own, a variety with enough diversification. But if you can just shift, and I've taught people who've told me they have no money, they can't save. It's really easy once you get momentum. There's a research project I did with a gentleman who was nominated for the Nobel Prize on behavioral finance. And what he did was he said, if you can even, you need to save 15% ideally. But if you could even save 3%, because anybody can do that. They took a group of blue collar workers in the Midwest and said, we're going to force you to save 3%. I think it was 3.25 or 3.5. But then everybody can go on a diet tomorrow. Everybody can save money tomorrow, right? So his tool was, all right, you're not going to save today, you're going to save tomorrow. We'll do the 3.5%. But then you go to your employer and say, the next time I get a raise, the first 5% goes to my savings account, to my investing account. And then every time you get a raise, you do that. Well, in 14 years, the average person was saving 15% and the top 40% were saving 20. Well, let me explain what that means. You and I were together before. When I'm trying to explain compounding to people, everybody understands it intellectually. But when I ask some of the richest people in the world, what are most investors failing to do? And they all say they're not tapping the power of compounding. So if you're in a situation where, as an example, let's take, you've got $100,000 that you've saved. You're 35 years old and you put it in the market and just leave it there and never add anything to it. If you leave it in the market and you're only being charged 1% in fees, at retirement 35 years later, you got $762,000 from that 100. Never added a dime. They grew that much.
Wow.
But if you pay 3% in fees, which is the average most people are paying, when you ask people what they're paying, they don't know, or they say 1%. Because when you hear about it, fees, let's say a mutual fund fee, you'll always hear 1%. That's the expense ratio. There are 17 other fees. So every 1% you overpay, 1% is the average. If you pay 2 or 3 and the average mutual fund is 3.12, sounds like nothing, 1 or 2%. Every 1% you overpay because of compounding means you lose a decade of income. So the person who paid 1% has $762,000. The person who paid 3% has $452,000 and they own the same stocks. It's just fees. So while we compound our interest, we also compound fees. So if you could save 3% and build it to 5, 10, 15, or you start with 10 or 15 and eventually get to 20, the best example I can give your viewers is that there's a gentleman who worked for UPS who literally never made more than $14,000 a year. And when he retired, he had $70 million. And he gave away $35 million while he was alive. And the reason was a friend of his set him aside and said, look, I'm going to make you rich. I'm going to make you rich later in life. And I'm going to do it by a 20% tax to your business. And he goes, I make $14,000 a year. I can't live on 20% less. And his friend said to him, if the IRS came and said a 20% more tax, you'd scream, you'd yell, and you'd pay it. We're going to pay it for you. And that 20% compounded generated $70 million. So for the people that are at home, the sooner you start, the better off you are, because compounding does it. I've got an example in the book of a guy that starts at 19. He puts aside $300 a month. He stops at 27. So he does it for 8 years. He only puts in, I think it was $35,000. But it's $1 million by leaving in the market when he turned 65 and he stopped at 28. He has a best friend that starts at 28, invests his entire life, puts in $180,000, and he has less money at the end. The sooner you start, the better you are.
I'm sorry to be a broken record, but it's just the truth. It's a purpose larger than yourself that keeps you going. If it's only to meet your own needs, you will drop back into your comfort zone. But for example, one of the great things that came out of COVID is I've spent most of my life as a vagabond, right? Because I travel all over the earth. So in most years, I travel to, 115 cities. And as you know, most of my seminars are multi-day seminars. And I go to 12 to 16 countries, like Australia 3 times. And so all of a sudden COVID hits and I had to adapt. I found this way to adapt. And now I'm reaching 10 times as many. My largest seminar is now 900,000 people versus 15,000. I did one football stadium in 2019 with 38,000 people, 40,000 people. It was incredible. So all this good comes from that adaptation, right? Figuring out what to do. But I think the other part of it is, during that same time, one of the great gifts was I could find a way to be home and still touch people's lives so deeply and do it in a way that was impactful. I could see it and feel it. I'm in their home. I could see their children. It's been amazing. And now I do both. I do hybrid. I got 1,000 people in front of me and 197 countries all around me. But one of the other benefits is we'd want to have a daughter. And I told my wife, I'm not having a kid after 50. I don't want to show up at high school reunion and be 70 years old. But now I've got a 48-year-old daughter and a 9-month-old daughter, to give you an idea. I got 5 kids and 5 grandkids. But my daughter, all the things I've ever done for myself, biohacking and health and all that stuff, now I'll be 80 at her high school reunion. So I got to use these things for a different reason. And so that doesn't let me get to a certain level and stand there. It's like, man, I got to be 92 to 102 range. In order to do that, I got to know every tool in the tool book to turn it around. So gave me even more drive. And then what comes out of that now is I can help anybody. This is my new book, by the way. It's called Life Force. But the point is, it's like I want to know every single tool. I got totally obsessed even more than I normally am. Because it's like, okay, I got a higher purpose. I got all my grandkids, all my children, but now I got my daughter. It's like, I got to have these tools. So, you probably know, I think you remember about 5 years ago, I was being crazy and I was snowboarding, chasing somebody who was 25 years old and a professional. And I had one of the most horrific accidents. I tore my rotator cuffs and, I've lived with pain, but I was 9 nerve pain, going to see these doctors, and what do they all say? Every single one says the same thing. Surgery, you got to cut it. It's the only way. And then I go, okay, how long's the rehab? Well, there's no guarantee your shoulder will work again completely. It could break again, but, probably 4 to 6 months. And I'm one of the best. So it's like, my brain's like, no, there's got to be a better way. And I remember seeing this study at Mayo Clinic where they said, you got to get a second opinion. They recommend to this day, it doesn't matter how good the doctor is, because only 12% of the time is the second opinion the same as the first, which means 88% of the time it's different. And so it's like, okay, I need more opinions. I was getting the same opinions. I was going to the same kind of doctor. So then I went to Peter Diamandis, who's my partner and friend. So he's an MD from Harvard, but he's also a rocket scientist. I was like, what about stem cells? I know a little bit about stem cells. So he interviewed me to Dr. Bob Harari, and they're both my co-authors in the book now and both my partners. And Bob's the guy that took, people probably remember years ago, 38 years ago, somebody took old rats and gave them young rats blood and vice versa. And magically the old rats got young, muscles, strong, hair darker, and the young rats got old. It's kind of a vampire thing, but that's how stem cells were discovered. So I went to him and he said, Tony, look, your shoulder is shredded. So I can't guarantee anything. But if you go get stem cells here in the US, forget it. Because the way they regulate and everything else, it's not going to do it. He said, go to Panama. And he goes, I want you to go down to this location and I want you to get 3-day-old stem cells. And he said, they're cord stem cells. It's not fetal tissue. I'd never do that. They throw away the cords and it's full of this life force that literally can change everything. And so I went down and I got this IV and yeah, I felt okay. And next day I was really sleepy. I woke up the third morning. Not only was my shoulder perfect, I have the MRI, just blow your mind, 3 days. But the most important thing is I had spinal stenosis. I've been in massive back pain for 14 years. No back pain whatsoever, no exaggeration. So I became nuts, first for stem cells and then for anything in regenerative medicine. So then I get invited by the Pope to be the cleanup speaker on believe it or not, the Pope puts on the #1 stem cell regenerative conference every 2 years because he sees it's not fetal tissue and he sees it as a gift from God and it's healing people in ways they've never seen before. So they asked me to be the cleanup speaker. I'm like, I'm no idiot. I'm not going to come clean up speak. I'm going to go the whole 4 days and attend every class. And so I met the greatest scientists on the face of the earth, Nobel laureates, brilliant people who are doing these breakthroughs in cancer and heart disease and Alzheimer's, but also regenerative medicine. And so right then I said, I'm going to write a book. I'm going to do like Money Master the Game. Only there I interviewed 50 of the most financially successful people in history. Here I interviewed 168 of the greatest Nobel laureates, scientists, MDs, the best on earth on how do you generate more energy. So like, for example, for years, if someone like a fireman or a person falls in a fire, you know what they look like afterwards. It's grotesque. It's so sad for their life. And the standard treatment is put cadaver skin on there to help them survive initially. Well, today there's 7 hospitals in the United States where they take your stem cells and they spray it on your face. And in the book, I show a picture of this fireman before and 3 weeks later, and you could never tell he was even in the fire. Jack Nicklaus, one of the greatest golfers of all time, couldn't stand for more than 10 minutes. He gave me an endorsement for the book. And he got stem cells and this other piece we'd show you on how to eliminate pain in a natural scientific way. He's playing golf again for the first time. Cristiano Ronaldo, the greatest, football soccer player in the world, gave me an endorsement of the book because it's the same thing. He's used regenerative medicine to completely turn his life around. So there are tools that'll blow your mind. There are tools for preventing things that'll blow your mind. There's a new test that just came out. I got a call from some of my partners about 5-6 months ago. And he said, Tony, there's been a breakthrough in the #1 killer in America, which is heart disease, right? And he said, there's this new scan called a CCTA scan. And if you've ever had a CT scan, they tell you how much calcium, they give you a score on your calcium, but hardened calcium is actually healed in the body. It's the loose calcium they call the widowmaker that can then block an artery and give you a stroke or give you a heart attack. And he goes, Tony, it's so hard to read. I'm sure you've had them before. I said, I have. He goes, they now have this AI that literally enters in your body, flow in your body, arteries, etc. And it goes through using AI and shows what's actually hardened and good and what's loose and gives you a score and then shows you what to do. He said they can predict a heart attack between 7 and 10 years in advance and show you what to do so it never happens. So my father-in-law was with me at the time. He's about to be 80 years old. He's a strong and beautiful man. But, people around you start telling you you're getting older, 80, arrange your affairs. And I could just see the decline in his psychology. And then your physiology usually matches that. So I said, Dad, I'm going to go to our center here in Florida. I said, I'm going to take a couple hours and do this new test and meet some guys and talk. Why don't you come with me? Let's do it together. I said, we're both at a stage of life where we're going to obviously have some of this calcium, but then it'll show us what to do. I said, why don't we go do it? My father-in-law, who worked his whole life lifting lumber in his own business, he is clean as a whistle. And then we have these tools now I write about in the book too. Like I had this ankle of mine that if I ever had a massage for the last 18 years, like don't touch it, because if you did, the nerves go crazy and it literally alt my spine like an electrical shock. I went in for a 5-minute procedure. They scan what's going on in the tissue in your body, right? And then they put in this fluid that opens up the channel and then it heals it. It's amnio fluid, for example. And it was a 10-minute procedure and I've never had a problem with my ankle since. That was like 3 years ago. So my dad had a hip issue. So while we're there, they do his hip and he walks perfectly out with no pain for the first time in 12 years. So we're getting on the plane and this is what I want for the book for people. It's one of the reasons I wrote it. My dad says to me, father-in-law, he goes, Tony, those people talk about 120 and that. I don't know about that stuff. But he goes, I'm 80 and my heart is solid. And he goes, and my hips are working and my muscles are strong. He goes, I could live another 20 years. He goes, you've only known my daughter for 22 years, been married to her. He goes, that's like a lifetime. He's got this whole new lease on life. So there are so many things you can do that can take away your fears about cancer, heart disease, Alzheimer's, etc. Or if you're there, things you can do so that you can have an alternative set of treatments that maybe are less toxic or have greater opportunity. And again, none of it's my opinion. Everything, just like Money Master the Game, is coming from the greatest medical doctors and scientists in the world. And it's everything from how to get stronger, how to be able to eliminate challenges in your body, how to produce more energy and strength in the shortest period of time, or how to heal the body if you're going through some real challenges.
Christian G and I were talking, he said something really beautiful to me. He's a dear friend of mine. I've known him for, I guess, about 15 years. His father is one of the most powerful spiritual teachers in India.
Yeah.
Oneness. And so, to give you an idea, he's considered an avatar there. So I went there and they had an opening. Christian G helped to organize it. And they expected 250,000 people over 5 days, and 500,000 people showed up the first morning. So it was like the ultimate craziness, if you imagine. So he's got some really beautiful grounding, and his father is not just a religious man. He's really a spiritual man. He believes whatever you believe is wonderful, but what you have to do is wire your brain so that you're connected to the aspect of your spirit or oneness. And he teaches various ways to do this. So anyway, Christian G and I, over the years, have done a lot of fun things together. And this, about 2 years ago, we were having a conversation and he said, you teach the secret to life is peak state versus lousy state, or being energy rich versus energy poor, that a relationship, you can love somebody, but if the energy's low, it's not going to show up. The energy's high, it will. He said, what if you swap those words and you swap peak state for beautiful state? I said, that works. A high energy state is a beautiful state. Any state where your high energy would be like love or joy or gratitude or drive or courage or faith or, playfulness or fun, any of those things are beautiful states. So he goes, yeah, I agree. And I said, and then suffering states would be low energy states. So that would be frustration, sadness, anger, resentment, loneliness, boredom, whatever. He goes, yeah, that's exactly right. So I can swap those. He goes, if you swap them, there's something cool that you might see or do. I said, what's that, Christian? And he said, I've made a decision that I'm going to live my life where I'm going to live in a beautiful state every day, no matter what. Even if it rains on my parade, even if people do things that are unjust. He said, the reason is because in a beautiful state, just like you teach a peak state, everything flows. And I said, well, that's pretty much what I've been teaching. He goes, yes, but if you think of the lousy states as suffering states, he said, then you can end suffering just by ending the state. And I said, I don't really relate to the word suffering. And I think most achievers do. Most achievers don't even get fearful. We get stressed. Right, I always tell people fear is the achiever word for stress, because if I follow your stress, it'll take me to your fear. But I realized I didn't relate to suffering. Like if you had told me 2 years ago, Tony, do you suffer? I'd say, are you kidding me? I got the greatest life. I have the most incredible wife and 4 kids, and I got 31 companies, and I'm financially free, and I have a mission I love, and I'm in good health. And that would all be honest. I wouldn't have been dishonest about it. But what really helped me out of that conversation, I left there and I went, well, where do I suffer? And I realized frustration is suffering, and I get frustrated. I get concerned. I get pissed off. I get, worried sometimes. And so what I decided to do was, just really create a 90-second rule for myself where I would end suffering as it arises. Because anybody tells you you're going to end suffering is full of crap. The reason is your brain is a 2 million-year-old brain, and it's not designed to make you happy. It's designed to make you survive. But there's no saber-toothed tiger for you to react to anymore. So now we worry about, what are people thinking of us? Do I have enough money? And in this country, in America, if you are in utter poverty, and I hate poverty, I feed 100 million people a year, so I'm not sitting on the sidelines. But if you make the worst and the least amount of money in this country and you're in total poverty, you're in the 1% of earners on the earth. Because 75% of the planet lives on $2.50 a day. So what I try to do is show people you can't build on failure. You can only build on success. So over the last 2 years, what I've done is play this little 90-second rule. And if I feel tension in me, I go, okay, that's suffering. Where's it coming from? What am I stressed about? What am I concerned about? And what I immediately do is I realize The stressful thought, since I've seen Christian G, I kind of traded one thing. What I really do now is I dig in and I notice that the only time you have stress or suffer is when you believe a stressful thought.
Yeah.
So what would be one or two of the most stressful thoughts that happen to you most often? Because we all have them, right? So what I told Christian G is I said, I think I've found the 3 triggers to suffering. He goes, what's that? I said, it's lost, less, never. Whenever you believe, your mind believes a stressful thought like, oh my God, my business is not going, or oh, this guy screwed this up and now I've lost something. I've lost this opportunity, or I've lost the time, or I've lost the money. Or it cannot be someone else, it could be you. You could say, I failed to do this. I did something or I failed to do something, and as a result, I've lost something I value, significance, trust, love, money, freedom, whatever. Or you've said something or did something or failed to do something, or I failed to do something or say something, and I feel like I have less love or less money or less freedom. Less will make you suffer. The one that's worse is never. If you start believing that because she said that or she did that, or because I failed to do this or I said that, I'll never have love again. I'll never be wealthy. I'll never be free. Once you believe that shit, it's true, because you won't initiate. You won't solve it. You won't create it. So I'm very sensitive to loss, less, never. Anything that triggers that, and the antidote to it is to realize it's not you. So your thought of, God, my business is stressful. Is this gonna, I'm sure it'll make it, but a little more part of you like, is this gonna make it? Or this guy screwed up and look, it screwed me out of all these things. When those things happen and you suffer, it puts you in a mode where what you're really suffering about is yourself. It's the me that makes us suffer. When a woman will say, I'm really worried about my children, I'm really stressed. She's suffering about her children, and I'll listen to her. And I'll say, tell me. And she'll say, well, they're not doing this, not doing that. And I'll turn to her usually and say, I hope you can hear yourself, because the real reason you're suffering is not because of your children. It's not because they're not doing well. It's because you think you failed them. It's about you. Because otherwise you'd just be working on the solution. But you're busy beating yourself up, feeling bad, thinking the worst case scenario, right? So the antidote to suffering, the antidote to loss, less, never, is appreciation. I always tell people, trade your expectation for appreciation. Your whole life changes. So I was just doing this talk here earlier, and I shared with them experience. And I'm fortunate enough to have my own, private jet now, but it's a intercontinental jet, so I can fly straight to China. But up until that time, I was chartering, but half my business was overseas, and it's like, $400,000 to fly to Australia and back in Gulfstream. So it didn't make any sense. I finally did well enough. I sold a couple companies, made a couple $100 million, and I went and bought the plane. But before that, I would be so stressed getting on Qantas Airlines. Because in my head I go, there's no internet. I'm cut off for 14 hours. I got 31 companies. I got this list of calls and texts and Slacks and emails. And by the time I get there, it's going to triple in size. I'd be all stressed out, right? And then one day I asked myself, what the F is stressful about sitting or lying when you got to bed, even on a commercial flight like that in first class? And I realized what an idiot I was, but it still grabbed me. You'd still suffer. And I remember one of the last times it happened before I got my plane, ironically, they announced on the air, they said, ladies and gentlemen, we're proud to announce we have international internet. And it was like God descended in the airplane. We're all cheering, clapping. It's so wonderful, right? And then within about 9 minutes, the thing broke down. Everybody's pissed. They're like, oh, this is bullshit. I can't believe this. I'm not putting up with this. And I tell a story because 9 minutes before, it was a miracle. Now, after 9 minutes, it's already an expectation. And when you have expectations, you're always miserable. I realized my happiness was so cheap because all I had to do was have this nearby and I could lose my happiness. Because 31 companies, 1,200 employees, 5 continents, I think. Yeah, 5 continents now. 7 different days. What are the chances that right now someone is screwing up something with that many employees and that many businesses?
100% chance.
100%.
Yeah.
So all I had to do was wait and open up and find the piece there. It's like, I can't believe what the hell is the matter with him. See, I realized all I had to do was have my phone to be stressed. If that's true, my happiness is so cheap. Because what are the chances of everybody doing exactly what you think they should do the right way every day? 0. What are the chances of people you love doing what you want them to do the way you want to do them every day? 0. What are the chances of you doing the right thing every day, even if you're talented and disciplined? 0. Your happiness will never last as long as it's got expectation behind it. Don't get me wrong. I have businesses, I run them, we manage them. But I know that people are going to screw up, or my idea of screw up is different than I think they should be. And sometimes their screw up will turn into something even better, right? Yeah. I got to give it room. So what I did was I began to realize I made the decision, it's the most important decision I believe of your life, that I'm not going to suffer anymore. Life's too short to suffer, and I'm going to live in a beautiful state every day. And the way I do it is I catch myself when I start to get that sense of stress. I let it go, and I see the idea go by. So your thoughts about this person messing up your business or not following through. If I was in a room with 10,000 people, I guarantee you 60, 70% of the business owners have the same thoughts at times. Right. I ask people all the time, tell me your most stressful thought. Oh, I'm worried about my children. This may happen. How many people have had that thought? Everybody. Yeah. I might not make it financially, blah, blah, blah. How many have had that? Everybody. My point is, it's not your thought. It's the mind, not your mind. When you think it's your mind, you identify with it, and you can't separate from yourself. But when you realize these thoughts have been around for millions of years, and I'm just thinking the same thought that so many people have thought before. Like, how many people have ever thought, I'm going to kill this son of a bitch? Now, you didn't do it, but you felt it. You said it. You were there, right? So we all have thoughts. It's only the stressful thoughts we believe that mess us up. So what I try to show people is, if you can start to realize these thoughts have been around for millions of years. If I told you 1,000,000 years, 1,000 or 100 years ago that we're going to go to the moon and back, you called me a lunatic or crazy. If I said 100 years ago, you're going to have a little box like this, it'll fit in your pocket, and you can click on it, and you can see what the weather is any place. You can click on it and see a live person on the other side of the earth and talk to them by looking in this box. And the way it works is invisible waves are traveling around the earth, and it pulls invisible waves in the box. You go like, read between the lines. There's no way, you dumb idiot. It's never going to happen. So what I want you to realize is thoughts are invisible waves. When you turn on a TV, it takes invisible waves, and depending on the channel, you're going to see a love story or an adventure or a drama or a comedy or a horror. The way you use your body determines which of those thought waves come through you. One moment you're pissed off, the next moment somebody makes you laugh. You change your body, you change the channel, you change what comes through you. So what I've tried to do in this area of beautiful state is simple. First, identify where you're suffering. What's your favorite flavor? Are you a worrier? Are you a pissed off person?
Stressed, angry.
What is it you do?
Yeah.
Second of all, decide you're going to kill that monster while it's little. You're not going to wait till it's Godzilla taking the city. You're going to break the pattern. You start to feel the stress. You see it as thoughts going by, and then you focus on something you appreciate, enjoy, or love. Appreciation, love, and joy destroy suffering. You can't be grateful and angry simultaneously. It's possible. You can't be worried and fearful and grateful simultaneously. So I tell people gratitude is one of the emotions to cultivate that'll destroy the suffering. And that's what we teach people to do. No matter what a good human being you are, when we get in lousy states, we behave in ways overtly and covertly, not even meaning to, that mess up our relationships. Yeah. So I felt like I'd be remiss if I wrote a whole book on finance, show you exactly how to get wealthy, and then I didn't show you real wealth. Because there's lots of people. Of the billionaires I'd interviewed, I don't want to grossly be unfair in estimate, but I would say the rarest commodity was somebody who was happy all the time. Somebody like Richard Branson, he is having the time of his life. No, he is sincerely that. He's hungry, he's driven, he's always growing, he's expanding, he's having fun. His favorite phrase, give it a go, Tone, let's give it a go. But I would say that it is the absolute minority. I tell people what's more rare than a billionaire is someone who's in a beautiful state every day, somebody who's happy every day. Yeah. You get a new billionaire in the United States every 6 days. Dime a dozen. Someone who's really, really, really happy, juicy. Like my goal now, I have a different goal. My goal is I want to find ecstasy in each moment. I want to find something to be passionate about each moment. And I've been living that the last 2 years religiously. In the beginning, my 90-second rule should have been like a 4-hour rule or maybe a 4-day rule. I was really shitty at it. But when you do something again and again, it becomes like a muscle, right? And you get good at it, and it'll make you more wealthy than money will. But you don't have to pick. You're going to be wealthy in financial terms and wealthy in emotional terms too, spiritual terms too.
Well, I have certain fundamentals that haven't changed. The first thing I do every single morning is I go in freezing cold water. And I've shared this with many people. It's not because I'm a masochist, but because it moves the lymph of your body, as you well know. And when you jump in, it never feels good to go in, but getting out, you feel incredible. But I do it for a different reason. I do it to train my brain to say, when I say now, it means now. When I say go, we go. I don't stand there because it's cold and go, maybe in a minute when I'm ready. I don't think I've ever had a morning I look forward to jumping in that water ever, but I always do it because I've trained my brain. This is how we work. And if you train your brain to do that every single day, then it'll do it on the more difficult and important things in life. But I also I do my priming, I think you're familiar with, which is I do 10 minutes, and I pick 10 minutes because if I said do 20 minutes or 30, I don't have time. But if you don't have 10 minutes for your life, you don't have much of a life. So I do this 10-minute process. And if people want to know it rather than walk through it right now, they can go to Tony Robbins /priming. There's a video, it's free. But the essence of it is I change my body radically, and I do 3 things to make sure that my brain is primed. And what I mean by primed is most people think their thoughts are their thoughts. Priming is a psychological principle where you think thoughts and you think they're yours, but very often they're created by the environment. So one example was Harvard has done multiple studies on this. And one of the studies they did was taking people, walking up to people. They hired 2 actors. They walked up to 100 people. They had to do the exact same thing, men and women. And what they did is they'd walk up with a cup of coffee in their hand, and they'd look at you and go, here, would you hold this for a second? And they'd look down and reach in their pocket to pull out their phone. And most people then take the coffee. There's nobody there. You're not looking to give it back, right? And then they do what they're doing on the phone. They put it back in. They go, thank you so much. And they take their coffee back and they walk away. But then about 20 minutes later, if you're at a mall or a school campus or whatever, a person comes by with a clipboard and they give you $20 and they say, listen, I know this sounds crazy, but if you'll give me 30 seconds of your time, the $20 is yours. I need you to read 2 minutes of this, literally this little story, and then just answer 3 questions for me. Here's the interesting part. Half the people have a reaction, more than 80%, and half have a reaction 80% difference. And here's the question. They read the same story, but half the people are handed hot coffee, half the people are handed iced coffee. And the question they ask is, how would you describe the main character of the story after they read a few paragraphs? And the people who are handed hot coffee say the person is warm and genuine, 81% of the people, 79 to 80, 79.8, it's a 1% difference, natural variability, who are given the iced coffee say the person is cold and uncaring. I could tell you 20 studies like that would blow your mind how your brain is conditioned or primed by the environment. And think about all that's gone on with COVID over the last 2 years and how many people's brains live in fear. And in my new health book, I put in there just to remind people with COVID, outside being 80 years old, the number one, or having 4 or 5 comorbidities, the number one factor, 80% of the people die of COVID, 79.8%, are obese. That's something you can do something about. The second factor, according to the CDC, is fear. Because anxiety makes people get short of breath, they freak out, and their whole nervous system starts to go shut down. Your immune system can be shut down just by fear alone. And so this experience of life that we have, most people just don't understand that you are being primed all the time. And unless you prime yourself, you're going to be primed by the environment, which most people understand that your brain right now is being conditioned and triggered whether you know it or not. If you're in any social network, it's being done continuously by algorithms. So I want to take control of my brain. So I do 3 quick things. 1, I take 3 minutes of those 10 minutes after I've changed my body, and I focus on 3 different events in my life that I'm grateful for. I usually pick 2 big ones and 1 small one. It could be as simple as a smile on my daughter's face, the wind against my skin. But I don't like, if you ever been on a roller coaster and you remember the roller coaster over there, it's not the same as remember going over the edge like you're there. So I do it in an associated way. and it changes your biochemistry. Now, it sounds pretty, positive thinky. I'm going to be grateful. But there's a value to it because the two emotions that mess up your business, your life, your relationships are anger and fear. And you can't be angry and grateful simultaneously. And you can't be fearful and grateful simultaneously. So by starting my day with that, and it's not some fake pump up positive thinking, they're real experiences. So it literally teaches your body to go in that state. Because otherwise, the environment we're in right now, there's a whole lot of uncertainty and fear. Then real fast, I do this 3-minute process that's kind of like a blessing. And then 3 minutes, the last 3 minutes are called 3 to Thrive, where I focus on 3 things I want to accomplish. But instead of thinking I want to accomplish, I see, feel, and experience it as done. I feel grateful. I celebrate it. And it trains your brain. So in 10 minutes, I'm done. Third thing that I'll do, I immediately send a message or a text or an audio message to somebody as a sincere compliment. And I don't go, dude, great job, or wow, you're cool. I say, listen, I saw you on Tuesday with those kids, and I saw you take that extra 20 minutes no one else did. And I just want you to know, I saw that, I thought that was incredible. So I'm always very specific so they know it's not just some positive thinking bullshit call, it's sincerely doing it. It makes me constantly look for the good in the people I work with. Well, number one, I love people, so I love to if you just call someone to make a compliment and it's not sincere, anybody can feel that. I don't do that shit, It's like I pride myself in finding the goodness in people or the skill sets in people. And I also know that what is acknowledged tends to grow. So from standpoint of that, I want them to feel that feeling of being appreciated. I want them to know I see what's happening behind the camera, so to speak. It's like, that's what matters. It's not how everybody else sees you, it's how you really are. And then it also deepens every relationship you have when you sincerely acknowledge somebody and you notice something other people don't notice. And so it deepens the connection. And to me, quality of life is the quality of 2 things, your emotions and your relationships. And, if my emotions are terrible, my relationships are going to be terrible. But if I have great emotions and I can extend that out to help other people, then it just makes me feel more alive. So I do it for me and them. It's a virtuous cycle. 4th thing I do is whatever I don't want to do, the most challenging part of the day. I want to go handle that problem. I want to handle that issue. And now you got positive momentum energy. Now you attack the most difficult thing of your day. And when you make that your habit, the most difficult thing gets smaller and smaller because you're feeling stronger and stronger, right? And then you have momentum. And so now you'll attack the next difficult thing. And it doesn't even feel difficult at that point. But the whole secret is most of us don't realize, depending on which researcher you buy into, somewhere between 45 and 55% of what we do is habitual. And the great thing about habit is you don't have to think. So I don't know about you, but the first time I tried to drive a stick shift car when I was a little kid, it's like I'm supposed to do this, watch the rearview mirror and it's too much. Yeah. But once you learn it, most of driving, 99% of it's habits, so now your brain is free to do other things. That's the value of making something habitual. The weakness of making it habitual is you don't grow, right? Mm-hmm. The weakness of making it habitual is you don't feel fully alive. So it's like you've got to find that balance in your life. But if you can create habits that make you do the right things for your mind, your body, your emotion, and for others, then let those take over. Then it's like working out. It's like in the early days, it's hard to work out. At this stage of my life or yours, if you didn't work out or I don't work out, my bet is you'd be pissed off and frustrated, right? You need to work out. It's a part of who you are now. In the beginning days, it's like the last thing I wanted to do. But once it's in your life, that now frees you up to use that energy for everything else that matters in your life. Because after you do that, everything has momentum. So those 4 are my core. Now my workouts, what I've done to be able to have more energy and vitality and strength. I just finished a book called Life Force. Spent 3 years on it. And in there, I give all the details of what to do depending upon what your goals are and what your direction is, stage of life. Are you looking for more energy or more strength? Are you looking to extend the quality of your life? Are you dealing with a real disease? And I did Money Master the Game, and I interviewed, at the time, 50 of the smartest people in the world financially, Ray Dalio, Warren Buffett, etc. This time I interviewed 167 Nobel laureates, scientists, and the greatest regenerative doctors on the face of the earth. So there's nothing in here that's my opinion. It is all science. And it's stuff that you would think would happen 20 or 30 years in the future that's happening either right now or the things that are coming in the next 12 to 36 months that the FDA is currently looking at for approval. I wrote this book. Every book I write with the intention of helping people change and improve their lives on a massive scale. But I wrote this book because it actually can save lives without exaggeration or hyperbole. And I wrote it not only for you, but for those you love, because as you get older, you'll discover more people will call you and say, it happens to me every week. Somebody's got cancer. Somebody's got a family member with Alzheimer's. Somebody's had a stroke. And so now I can go, here's the cutting edge right now. Here are the doctors, people that you go to right now. Here's how to educate yourself literally in minutes on virtually every subject. That's why it's so robust. You can take as little of it or as much as you want, but you'll appreciate as an athlete some of the stuff in there that will blow your mind about how to increase your body's natural ability to produce energy and also how to keep you young longer. Because, most people think of genes as their destiny, and I know you know better. Genes are not your destiny. Genes, think of that as like the piano. What you care about is the piano player, right? And that piano player is the process that your body uses to direct those genes. And so there's a process that makes that possible, that keeps your system running ideally. Think about it, when you're young, you have a mansion, everybody works for you, is young, there's plenty of resources. As you get older, the mansion's older, it breaks down a bit more, the personnel's older because your stem cells are older. Like all these things start to break down. But what if you could rejuvenate the house and the people in it and the systems going on in it? Well, it's like, I'm fortunate enough to have a really wonderful plane. But my plane's not brand new. I made it brand new. I repainted it. I put new engines in it. But instead of spending $100 million, I spent a third of that to have my own BBJ. I can fly anywhere on Earth. And I'm basically in a flying house of 5,000 square feet. But I refurbished it all. Well, wow. That's what's happening right now. I don't know if you saw it today. I wrote about this in the book. There's regeneration of body parts that has already been happening for some time. Dr. Tony Robbins has been doing this at Wake Forest University for like 15 years. He's replaced parts of people's bodies where he's grown them literally with stem cells so it doesn't get rejected and goes your body. Well, now they're doing it not only that way, but they're doing it with pig implants. And today was the first day. I wrote about it coming. I said it would happen by the time you're reading this book, and it's happening right on schedule. They just did the first implants for a heart for a gentleman who couldn't get a heart transplant because 100,000 people are on the list and 6,000 people are dying every year because they can't get it. But they're able to actually change the genome of the pig because they have the right structure so your body doesn't reject it. And we're at the beginning of that. Over the next 2 or 3 years, over the next 5 years, you're going to be able to actually grow from your own stem cells. This is not science fiction. They're doing it right now, but they'll do it in mass. You'll be able to grow those pieces, and if there's a breakdown, boom, you replace it with a new part, and it's brand new. Just like you would, forget the plane. Think of a car. Most people have had a car that maybe they've refurbished, and now they make it all new. That's where we're heading, to give you an idea. Not to mention the fact that everything is code. So think of it this way. 25 years ago, it took 13 years to do something that no one thought was possible. Ray Kurzweil was one of the people that drove it forward, a good friend of mine. It was like mapping the genome. They thought it would take 100 years and $100 billion. And guess what? They did the thing in 13 years. After 7 years, they'd only figured out 1% of it. And they all said it'll never work. And he explained 1% doubled over 7 years will get us to 100%. We'll get to where we want to be. So they spent $2.7 billion in 13 years. Do you know what it costs to do your human genome right now? $600 and you can have it done overnight. I mean, transistors. You remember, you're probably not as old as I am, so you don't remember, but original transistors, you get 4,000 transistors, put together to have this microchip, and it was $1 a transistor. Well, now you get 6 trillion for a fraction of a penny each. So our bodies are code. And so I'm sure you've heard about CRISPR and some of the things happening there where they're literally changing the code of what's going on in your body and eliminating the disease completely. Dr. Sinclair from Harvard just did a piece where they turned on these Yamanaka factors. I won't try to explain it to you in 2 seconds, but it reverses the aging process. They took mice that are blind, where the retinas, they've had glaucoma, so the nerves are gone, and regrew the nerves, like reversed aging, and their first time in history, and these animals can see. They're doing gene therapy as a young boy who can see again by gene therapy, by changing what's going on in the eyes. We are living in the greatest time in human history, and the changes that are going to happen over the next 3 to 12 years are beyond anything you could imagine.
I would say health, as strongly as it is, I had a real health scare this last year. I think I shared with you. Yeah. I had mercury poisoning, and mercury mimics dementia. So it makes you lose your memory in the middle of talking, which I do 50-hour events with 10,000 people and never forget a thought. And I've had over the last year where I literally don't know where I am and what's going on in the middle of being in the room. Now, no one's seen it or known it because I ask afterwards because I'm pretty good at hiding it. But my mind works so fast I can put something else in there. But that's been really rough. And then the other part, and so you feel vulnerable. It's happened twice when I was speaking to you today. Wow. Felt like, did I say this before? Because I've done a bunch of interviews. And so it popped in my head just for a minute. Did I say that? I'm not sure I said that. And so just for a moment, and I'm not used to that. I'm used to only being here with you or with them. I'm not in my head. So I'm down. I went from 123 in mercury on a 0 to 5 scale. It was the highest mercury they measured, where they thought I should be dead. And it took me a year, and I'm down to now 9 on a 0 to 5 scale. So it's still there, but I'm almost done. So there's great vulnerability in that. But outside the physical, I really don't feel that. And I'm not being like I'm indestructible or some bullshit like that. It's just everything is a habit. Worrying's a habit. Fear is a habit. I'm pretty comfortable in who I am. I'm 56 years old, and I'll be 57 in a few days. I've lived a lot of life. So I've buried, 3 fathers and a mother. I've, been told I have a tumor in my brain. I'm going to die. I've had companies that were near the edge financially and was able to turn them around. I've faced enough things right now that it's not I'm so strong or cool or some shit. It's just that I've faced all those things so many times that my threshold of control is much higher than most people's. Because, I made it through how do I keep the doors open? I need $50,000 and I don't have 50,000 to 5 million to at one point 120 million I needed because 2 of my partners went broke and I was holding the bag, to now I'm doing 5 billion. Right. And I only did that because I made it through those thresholds. So I'm pretty comfortable with most things, but I think there's vulnerability in health. And also I love my wife so much, I can't imagine losing her, and she's in good health, but those things would feel vulnerable to me. I would say, that the secret to life is to get outside yourself and find the way to add value to others. There's nothing that's more fulfilling than doing something beyond yourself. I think one of the things that makes me proud to be a human being is human beings will do more for others that they care about than they'll ever do for themselves. Yeah. And when you tap into that, you have more energy than anybody else. You have more joy. You have more excitement because, as I always say, life supports whatever supports life. Motive matters. And there's nothing wrong with supporting yourself. I support myself. Everyone supports themselves. But when you're trying to support your family, you get different insights, your community, the world. So I think the idea of being obsessed with learning, growing, and adding value to me is the most important thing in life because, the only way we're happy is by making progress. We grow and we feel alive. We give and we feel 10 times more alive. But you got to grow to have something to give. So that'd be 1. 2 for me is, I'd say that if you're going to be alive and you're not enjoying yourself, you've wasted your life. That it's like every day, the gift is find something to appreciate, something to enjoy, something to love, something to give thanks for, because that sense of aliveness comes from that gratitude, comes from that peace. And then I'd say 3rd, and simplistic as it sounds, love is everything. I mean, I'd trade the love that I have with my wife, my children, my dear friends, my coworkers, my audiences. I'd trade that for all the money in the world. I mean, no amount of money can match that process. But I'm appreciative of having the money because it allows me to have portable power. I can, I take care of, right now I provide 250,000 people a day with fresh water in India because what kills children is waterborne disease, and it's so easy to solve. And I'm going to get that 250,000 to 1 million people a day shortly. I'm on target for it. We're feeding 100 million people a year. I'm going to do that for 10 years, my 10-year plan. And then I'll have 100 million annuity that keeps on feeding 100 million meals every year. I provided 100 people last year with becoming medical doctors because there's a giant shortage coming. Right. And I also wanted African Americans who just didn't have the opportunity to have that opportunity. We live in a world that isn't always just. So I did that. The internet is worthless if you can't read and write. So, I partnered with Elon Musk and with Peter Diamandis and the X Prize, and we did an education X Prize that we've had unbelievable progress on, where 1 out of 7 kids in this country, 1 out of 7 people in the world can't read or write. They're illiterate. And 250 million children are illiterate, 250 million. The internet's worthless when you can't read or write. So there aren't enough teachers. There never will be. Our demographics don't serve it or support it. So we've got all these firms competing for this $15 million prize we put up, which then means on an iPad, they can teach themselves to read and write and do basic arithmetic within 18 months from nothing. And it's going to be open source. So the winner gets 15 million, then everyone in the world will have access to it, So those types of things, they're what make you feel alive. They're all expressions of love. I always tell people, other than love, my labor is the greatest gift I can give someone, because it's an expression of my love. And so I think that third point is love is everything. Make sure every single day you strive to be a blessing in the lives of the people you meet. That's my daily prayer.